Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Breakfast with Bobby. I am your co-host, Christina Bloom. I am here with my lovely co-host, Bobby Klebano, and we have with us today Marcus Kasnich, who has been with us a few other times, and it's always a great conversation. And I think what's going to make it an even better conversation is that we don't have a topic today. We're just going to talk. And whatever happens, happens. So buckle up because it could be interesting.
Definitely not boring.
How are you guys doing?
I'm okay. I'm my sister passed away a couple of weeks ago, and that was a whole new experience for me after, despite the fact that I've lost three other siblings. This one was similar yet different as each one is. But in addition to that, I just have to tell you guys, I know I sent you a picture, Christina, but I had a new experience on Saturday.
I know, so excited for you.
Oh my God, it was the coolest thing. I went up in a helicopter. It was a private helicopter. I was at a birthday party and I almost didn't get to go, and I was heartbroken because I didn't get to go, and then I almost cried because I was and I wasn't sure if I was going to be so scared, but it was so personal. It was so quiet and so well maintained. And then, of course, we did some dives, and I mean, we didn't do a barrel roll or anything, but we flew out. There's a million lakes around here in Wisconsin, and we flew over about three or four of them, and then, of course, we did a couple of bobs and weaves and everything, and it was just really I felt so free up there. And of course, we had headsets, so we were talking back and forth. And the man who owned the helicopter, apparently, my friend's daughter-in-law works for him, and so he just asked me if I had been up in a helicopter before, and I told him no. And he said, after my first one, he said I ended up spending over $1 million on his helicopter. So it was just a really nice, personal, quiet. It was very peaceful. And I think that's exactly what I needed after going through all of that death and dying and caretaking and cleaning and whatnot. So Marcus, what do you think about talking about like death and dying and all the stages or, the
We can talk
spiritual
about it.
aspect of that?
Yeah.
Because after she passed away, it was very difficult, and it was a long drawn out kind of 24 hours with a lot of activity and there were a lot of moving pieces there. But the interesting thing is, I did expect her to touch base with me somehow spiritually. But the morning after she passed away, I felt her. I felt her warm, kind energy, and she was thanking me for all the stuff that I had done for her. And after that, maybe 2 or 3 days after that, I don't feel her much anymore. So I wonder if you could just sort of touch base on that. How does that happen? How does the death and dying thing go? The spirit, where do they land?
Hmm. Okay. I can talk about from my perspective, having passed and what my experience was and how I feel about what happens. But here's the thing I want to start with on that topic. I would say a lot of people talk about it with a lot of certainty, and I don't talk about it with certainty because as you know, I had a near-death experience where I was on the other side for a period of time and came back, and again, very specific experience on the other side. But who's to say that that's what happens when somebody passes, right?
Right.
Like we all talk about like, oh, here's what happens on the other side. I'm not sure anybody really knows because if you come back, who's to say that that's the same thing that's going on for somebody who's passing like and they're not coming back? So a lot of people say, well, this is what happens. Well, I'll tell you what I've seen with working with clients and what I've seen in terms of experiences. Typically, the soul stays around for a little while, not always, but I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this too, Christina,
Mm-hmm.
where I mean, the when we pass, we lose the physical body, obviously, but the consciousness, the imprint of the consciousness of the individual may stay around a little while, depending, and this is really depending on the needs of the individual when they pass. Like maybe that's part of their dharma that they need to serve for a while and take care of and assist and help the living for their transition, or it's part of the experience they need to go on as their journey. So there's no set thing as to what happens, right? For some people experience connecting to their past loved ones for periods of time before they finally don't experience them anymore. And then as far as what I mean, you just spent an entire time experiencing disembodied beings, Christina, with ghosts who don't pass, who kind of get stuck in between and never leave a certain zone of consciousness.
Many of
So
them for centuries.
for
Yeah.
centuries,
Mhm.
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, and a lot of the work I've done with shamanic work with different beings that are disembodied is helping them transition over to the other side because they don't a lot of them don't know they've passed. You know what's a really good movie that it's dark, it's a dark element to the movie, but it's a phenomenal movie is the movie with Robin Williams called What Dreams May Come, if
Oh,
you
I
haven't seen it.
love that movie.
The entire movie takes place on the other side, and I would say I love the depiction of heaven by this movie because it's reflected the experience that the individual, the main character, is having on the other side is a complete reflection on their belief system. So it kind of interweaves what they
Hmm.
believe, how they see heaven to be, what it's going to be, the experience, and then the movie takes place with this individual's entire experience, belief system, and reality, and then what they manifest on the other side as this fluid reality of heaven or the afterlife or whatever, and then the experiences that the journey that this individual goes on as they pass, and his wife who passes and commits suicide, and then there's this whole thing about someone who's in suicide and doesn't know that they've actually passed. And I've experienced that with beings who have passed, who have committed suicide or have somehow lost their life quickly, and then they're kind of stuck in the in between, and that's where you get a lot of ghosts. That's what the disembodied energy of ghosts are for a lot, and they get attached to a certain area. There's karma that they have to work out, so it's not cut and dry as to what exactly happens. I mean, people who tell you they know for sure, I don't buy that because you would only know for sure if you pass for sure, and they're not necessarily communicating back to the people here to tell them, unless of course there's a medium who's taking that information in. But then that information's coming through the medium is going to be filtered through the consciousness of that individual
Right.
and their belief systems. So you can't take any of it with pure certainty,
Right. I
right?
completely 100% agree. And Bobby, before you ask him another question, I want to weigh in on this.
I hope you do. I hope you do.
Um, as a professional medium, I do talk to a lot of spirits who have
Right.
left the body, right? And the more quickly and unexpectedly someone leaves their body, the longer they seem to stay around because they don't actually realize, in many cases, that they have left their bodies
Or they won't accept it, right? There's
or
a
they
lot of them
won't
that won't,
accept it.
yeah,
So
that they
they're still
pass.
around. They're trying to talk to people, they're trying to get people's attention. And eventually, somehow they come to the realization that that body's gone. Okay. But because consciousness is so strong that we can create in the physical or the non physical world any experience we want to have.
Mhm.
So if someone is in denial about their own physical death, they can create in their own consciousness that they are still alive, that they are
Yeah, they
still coming and going and doing everything that they always did. And then we have residual hauntings, those who just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over and over to infinity, unless someone interrupts them or something interrupts them,
it's a
where they just
feedback
keep
loop.
having, yeah, it's a feedback loop. They
Yeah.
they keep having the same experience over and over because usually once I have been able to talk to a couple of them that I've worked with that were able to snap out of it. But what they were trying to do was figure out what happened. And again, it's usually something that happens quickly
Well,
where
there's
they're
no
trying to
time
figure it
on the
out.
other there's no time on the other
Exactly.
side. So it's
There's
not
no
like
time.
we're not tracking it like you track it in the linear world.
No, not at all.
So
Not at
so
all.
what we may consider a
A
long
loop.
time of a loop, that the feedback loop that a lot of these disembodied energies are in, they don't know it's been a millennia,
Right. They're just
right?
ruminating on it, trying to figure
They're
out what
just
happened. They're
yeah,
literally thinking about it. But those of us who have the ability to
yeah.
see the loop. But they're literally just thinking about it.
So
So,
it's I wish I could say it's certain, like that there's some
yeah,
certain thing and there's an equation, but it's very unique to each individual
it is.
passing,
Every single person has their own experience crossing over. So
which
there
makes
is no
sense,
one
right?
answer,
Which
of
makes
course,
sense.
because we all have our individual experiences here. Why would we not have them on the other side? Right?
Exactly.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is going to take us off kind of in a left turn here, but have you heard of a tulpa?
Tulpa, no, I don't know the term.
Okay, so that is, I'm not sure where the name came from because I don't want to read the whole article again and I don't remember. But there was a college, I believe it was in Toronto in 1972, where the class concentrated on a specific personality, a specific thing, and they created a ghost.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, yeah. So yeah, tulpa. That's a tulpa where we have such strong consciousness and none of us use it, I don't think, to the fullest ability.
Not on this plane,
Not
anyways.
in, not in this plane. But this group got together, this class in college, and created a ghost with their thoughts and their
Which sa-
descriptions.
which
Yeah.
says a lot about the manifesting ability of individuals, but it also says
Mhm.
a lot about the fluidity of consciousness and
Yes.
what a collective can create based on their belief systems.
Yes.
Which is this because a lot of people say, well, are angels real? Are beings from other different streams of consciousness real? And I'm like, yes and no. Yes, they're real because the collective believes in certain things and feeds the energy of that and helps support and feed energy
Exactly.
into it. But
Exactly.
is that a manifestation, like you called it a tulpa? Is that a manifestation by the collective? Or is it, are these, because for me, every being that you experience on the other side is a kind of interface to consciousness. So
Right.
depending on your belief system, will craft what kind of beings, what kind of guides, and what kind of spirits you connect with on the other side, because that's what your consciousness is creating. So someone's
Right.
like, you're telling me I create my spirit guides? I'm like, the filters are there because of our collective's unconscious. There's realms, but the way you engage, the kind of interface you have with the divine is
Yeah.
100% based on what you believe, what your conditioning is, and what you align to. For instance, people who align, let's say you're Christian, you align to like Christian iconography and archetypes like Mother Mary or Jesus, you may manifest when you connect on the other side, you may manifest connections, interfaces that are Christian oriented,
Of
as opposed to
course.
someone who comes from a pagan environment and then creates pagan influences on the other side. So that's well, a lot of what we experience from the other side is can be determined, like you said, by the manifestation power we have, but
Hmm.
also by the collective consciousness that all believes in a certain thing, which actually animates it.
Right.
So is any of it real? Well, if you go back to
Are we?
and this is the thing,
Right.
Is
the
anything?
relative reality is that, we call it the simulated reality now. This is the
Right.
new term, but that's an old term from Sanskrit called Maya, which means the grand mystery and the grand illusion. So our reality is so mutable. We have the ability to craft and create. Now it's a little harder in 3 dimension. It takes a little longer for things to manifest because it's denser, but
Right.
we're crafting our reality all the time. So the
Yeah.
way we view death and our belief systems around death often will influences our experience of what that looks like and what it feels like. And I wouldn't say that the Western world has a healthy relationship with the dying process, anyways,
No, not
right?
at
And that's
all.
a good that's something we should talk about because man, there's so much fear. There's so much, there's so much stuff woven into the whole death thing
Hmm.
that we've created a whole thing around it that may not necessarily have to be there, just
Right.
based on our fear,
Right.
right? I mean, that what's the biggest fear of any human? It's dying.
Dying.
Like everything
Actually,
is
it's public
motivated by
speaking.
death. Yeah, that's what they. It's
Because
true.
they think you're going to die.
It's one of the top five. Public speaking is definitely one of the top five.
Yeah,
But
it was some somebody put out a poll or some kind of thing, where people answered the questions, and there were more people afraid of public speaking than dying.
Well, until you face it, until you're
until you
in the
face it.
experience,
Yeah.
until you're in the experience of
Yeah.
dying, and then all of a sudden, or
Sorry, I
death.
just had to be an ass and throw that in
That's
there.
that's fine. It's early.
That's what we do. It's
So
okay.
I would say, I mean, I said most of human beings' fear is motivated by the idea of being erased from this reality. And that's really the
Yeah.
ego losing its identification to what it considers real.
Mm-hmm.
So we have human beings they are motivated, so much of what's happening is motivated by our fear of death. Think about people creating legacies and wanting to leave something for their family before they go. All of that is a motivation that you're going to be erased. That this thing here is not, is not permanent. And especially if you believe in the reincarnation theory, where you recycle, which I totally believe in, by the way, because that makes more sense to me than a lot of the other things. But if
Same.
energy can't be created and can't be destroyed, doesn't it make sense that it's recycled into a different form, just like everything else on this particular uh, this realm that we call Earth, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, this whole idea, people are the version of you, Bobby, Christina, Marcus, it will never exist ever again in any shape or form the way it exists in this moment, in this physical form, with this biological experience, with this set of experiences, with this set of condition. You are completely a one time happening in the universe, right?
Right.
So a lot of people say, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to deal with it in my next life." I'm like, "A, you probably won't remember when you do the loop and come back in. You're going to have a completely different body, more than likely, than you had here before, and a whole different set of conditions that you're coming into, that you're choosing to come into to have your Earth university experience of learning and growing and
Yeah.
experiencing this realm." So I mean, people don't treat this as a one-time happening. They it's kind of weird the way we have it. We have kind of in one respect we have this profound fear, but in the other respects we have this denial. So it
Right.
creates this weird relationship with death.
Do
It's
over. Yeah.
it's a very strange thing, and I think that if we were more healthy around the transition from this realm to another experience, I do believe we're going to go through another experience. Based on
Oh.
my personal experience, stuff
Mm-hmm.
happens on the other side, right?
Right.
And again, we're talking about it like it's a fact, but most people don't understand nor view nor necessarily fully believe that.
Right. Right.
So I
Bobby,
don't
what
know.
was your question? I'm
So
sorry. I wanted
It's
go
Bobby to
ahead.
okay.
ask her question.
Go
Some
ahead.
somewhere in there, it usually gets strewn
Gets
around
answered.
and
Yeah.
it gets answered eventually. So you mentioned that some spirits get caught in a loop,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and I'm
Isn't
aware
that like a
of,
haunting?
right. And so if they're stuck, and you guys, I have not learned this yet. I know a little bit, but when you're uh, facilitating them to pass on, to move on to the next, to help them go home, do you and do they know? I mean, you said that they're stuck in a loop. Can you get them out of that? Are they willing to listen, or do they just deny it? And
Sometimes.
That would be my answer. It really
Sometimes.
it's
Yeah.
completely dependent on each unique individual and the circumstances of their haunting or their feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they see it, they don't see it at all. I just because we can view because we have a sensitivity to the different seeing beyond the physical. I mean,
Mhm.
whether that's whether we like that or not like it, it's part of our reality that when you there's a certain kind of awakening to being accessing subtle realms. Just because you can see it doesn't mean they understand or are they're done with their loop.
Right.
And again, it's not, we talk about it like we understand it. We don't necessarily
Yeah,
understand it.
Yeah.
There's not a set of rules that apply across the board for every single being because it's very different based on each individual journey. So the answer that she gave, sometimes I would agree with.
Yeah.
Sometimes they see it, sometimes they can connect with you, sometimes they see you watching them, sometimes they can acknowledge the fact that we can connect to them, sometimes they'll leave, sometimes they're not asking. But what if they're
Yeah.
not asking for help? Right? This is just like like in the physical world. How many people you try to help them, they're not asking for help, and then you get frustrated because they're not doing because you could see what they need or what they could get would help them, but they don't necessarily want it. I mean, the spirits are the
Exactly.
same way,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're as stubborn, as connected, as identified, as completely they can get lost in their own loop. So, I mean, my experience of death with a lot of people is sometimes beings will stay around for a period of time and help, especially with the transition of their passing with their loved ones. That
Hmm.
happens with a lot of people who say, I felt my mother, I felt my sister pass, I felt such and such, and I had a communion with them. And some of that is what's left over in our identification, and some of that's what they need to do as part of their final final act of service before they pass on
Right.
for the living. So, this is this whole shamanic world of dealing with the death, the subtle realms of reality is as individual as humans when they're in their physical reality. It's it's
Yeah.
it's an individual experience.
Very
I mean,
much
so
so.
are there some things that are similar across the board? Sure. But for the most part, I've working like you, working with people from all over the world for many,
Hmm.
many years. You've seen it all different kinds of variations of
I think I've seen it all, and then I see something I've never seen before. I
it.
mean, literally, it happens all the time. It's
Yeah.
really like this, not this past weekend, the weekend before, I went on a paranormal investigation. It was like a conglomeration of people from different groups, and there was one little boy who like was just standing in a corner in a workroom in a basement of what used to be a poorhouse, a poor farm, right?
Okay.
So he was just standing there and I couldn't get him to talk to me. When anybody else was in the room or when we were running EVPs, he wouldn't talk. He wouldn't tell me anything. And then everybody else left the room and I'm like, okay, you're safe now. And he told me his name and I said, who do you want to come and get you? Because he wouldn't leave on his own. His big sister. I said, okay, what's her name? And he told me, and she came and got him and they left. But he was apparently part of what was an underground railroad thing. And they told him, stay right there, don't make any sounds because
Oh,
you don't, it be, well, if he made
yeah.
noise, they might find him, right? So, yeah, so he'd been standing there for over 100 years, not
My
making
God.
any sounds, just waiting. But he had no idea that that much time had passed, you know?
Yeah, like that. That's
He
that.
has
That
no concept.
they have no concept. There's no concept of time when you.
Mm-mm.
Time is a conscribed thing that we've created in this relative world in order to measure. It's
Right.
really an ego. Time is ego based because it's
Yeah.
based in a finite thing so that we can manage and kind of map onto our reality something linear so that we can function, right?
Right.
So time does not exist in different realms, not the
No,
same way,
not the same
not the
way.
same way. No.
Mm-mm.
So, I mean, what for I've talked to many people who've passed or have had near death experiences, and they could have experienced entire lifetimes of journeys within a 5 to 10 or 15 minute window that translates here. So
Right.
it again, individual based on what your needs are, based on what your soul, your atma, what your consciousness needs as part of your
Mm-hmm.
journey. So that's why I say to me, the one thing I feel certain of is that this is not the end, that
Yeah.
this physical reality is the densest level of experience. It's not the end game. It's not the end game. And I'll tell you, having been on the other side and experienced, and I'll tell you the things I've experienced on the other side is there is no ego the way there's a human ego here. The interface is
Right.
different because I didn't have the experience personally when I crossed over of the conditioning of the human experience. There was clarity. I had an identification of my own separateness and uniqueness as a being, but when I crossed over, there was no conditioning there, so there was a kind of clarity in the way I viewed the world. But I will
Mm-hmm.
say this: a lot of people talk about when they get on the other side, they trust all spirits implicitly, and I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you go
Yeah.
on other realms? Why would you trust all spirits implicitly? You don't trust all humans implicitly in the relative world. Why would you trust spirits implicitly? So some people are like, well, is there a protocol? And I'm like, yeah, you have to ask questions. You have to determine who you're talking to, what you're talking to, whether it's something you want to engage with, right? Like the shamanic world of the subtlety of that is very subjective, but it also requires diligence and discipline and discernment, just like when you're meeting people in the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just did a podcast and people asked me all about oh, how do I connect to beings? And I'm working with this shaman who's doing ayahuasca, and they're giving me this list of things to think about when I'm connecting to spirits. And the person who sent me the question said, well, it seems very fear-based. And I'm like, I don't see it fear-based at all. You would have discernment when you connect with humans on this realm. Like, you don't assume every human being you meet is kind, loving, has your best interest in mind, wants to help you, doesn't have its own agenda, right?
Yeah.
So why would you, as above, so below? So why wouldn't it be the same when you engage in the subtle realms of reality? Which is why a lot of people are not disciplined, they're not discerning, and they're not cautious. And as someone who walks in those realms, whether I like it or not, I've learned to be discerning.
Yeah,
And
you have to be.
most people aren't.
Yeah. Even when you've passed over, you still got to check your gut, right? You
You
still
gotta
got
check.
you still, you,
Exactly.
you still have to check that gut feeling. You still have to use your discernment and your intuition and all of those things because not everyone, like you said, not everyone in the subtle realms, which we call subtle because not everyone can see them or experience them consciously, but in other realms, it's the same story. It's like with
Yeah.
ETs. We have some that are here to help us, some that are here to hurt us, and some that are just completely ambivalent to us at all, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah.
And a lot of people talk about different species of beings, and I'm like, well, I mean, look at the species of humans. You get the
Yeah.
the range of everything from the most kindest, loving, empathetic, benevolent beings to the most dangerous, angry, vindictive, cruel beings. Like, you get the range, right? So that
Right.
range exists in the subtle realms too. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
in the subtle realms, the way they define it is the lower astral and the higher astral, which is
Mm-hmm.
just a vibrational way of saying things that vibrate at a dense vibration are the lower astral, and the more contractive ways of beings, as opposed to the higher vibrational beings, which resonate at a very high vibrational level, and that creates a different flavor of beings. So the angels and the celestial beings and the highest vibrational things, they live in the higher astral. That's all a vibrational reality. And then the demons and then the entities and the parasites, they all live in the lower astral. But that's a spectrum of the spiritual world, just like the physical world,
Right. And
right?
using those words, people tend to visualize, right? So
They
higher and
do,
lower, when
right.
it really isn't higher and lower, it's frequency.
Dense, frequency, dense.
It's
It's all
frequency.
an
Yeah.
energetic thing. So the
Yeah.
problem with this conversation is that people make a lot of opinions and assumptions, and they're very certain. They think they're very certain about what is on the other side. And like Christina said, just when you think that you figured it out, you experience something new
Yeah.
that completely uh, annihilates what you view your belief system to be around death and around
Right.
what's happening on the other side.
And even around like how do we even identify beings on the other side? Because they aren't always visual. And
Yeah, it's
even
true.
when they're vibrational, it can be deceptive. If you're not really good at tuning into energy, that can be really deceptive. And I've seen people buy into things that and end up getting hurt or losing, pieces of their life or whatever,
Playing around with stuff they shouldn't
playing
be.
around with stuff they shouldn't be. Yeah.
But that's why people are like, this conversation is interesting in the sense that people want to treat the spiritual world like something that's not the same as the relative world. And the way people engage with their spiritual reality, the sloppiness with their energy, the lack of discerning, somehow think that that all lies in the spiritual world. But there's consequences and implications to being lack of discerning, to being undisciplined in the spiritual realm, and I would say even more so than the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why you have to have training. Like, this is why the ancients had mystery schools and places you would go, and layers of understanding. You would learn from masters. Now any Tom, Dick, or Harry can get on and say do all this stuff, but they don't necessarily have the tools to, when you're in that world, to navigate it with awareness, consciousness, and discernment. I would say the biggest lacking thing in the spiritual world, but also in the what people who travel different realms, either consciously or unconsciously, is discernment. They
And
do not have discipline.
responsibility.
Yeah, they do not have
Yeah.
responsibility. They do not have discernment, and they do not have
No.
discipline about the way they're engaging. And we treat it like a circus event, like it's like a fun, entertaining thing in a lot of cases, but it's reality. It's a subtler version of this reality. So I say if you want a rule of thumb, treat everything in the spiritual world with the same level of discernment, discipline, and attention that you would if you were meeting people in the physical realm.
Unless you're
But then
paranoid
again,
and delusional, then, there you go.
the more experiences you've had, the more paranoid and delusional you
Delusional you
become
get.
because you get everything. So I would say
Yeah,
every individual's it's unique to each individual.
it is.
For me, like I had passing with my grandparents who passed. One of my grandparents passed. I never saw them again, never connected. They were gone. And my other, the husband of my grandfather, he hung around for like I had experiences of him as a young boy for probably about 3 to 5 months afterwards. And he would anytime I would play my musical instrument, because one of the biggest thing is he would sit and listen to me play all the time. So whenever I played my keyboards and piano, I could feel him in the room, sometimes see him in the room listening. So is
Right.
that an echo of me because of that's my personal experience of how I remember him and there was a fondness in that connection? And am I reanimating that connection as a way to feel kinship to him? Or is that him who needs that connection and is tethered to this physical reality through that very powerful emotional experience? I don't know.
Or is it the combination of the two?
Or is a combination of the two? You don't
Yeah.
know. So anyone who says it's this, these are the levels, these are the realms, I always say I wouldn't approach the world of spirituality or anything for that matter with that level of certainty. Certainty creates dogma. Dogma
Mm-hmm.
creates control. And so I'm not as certain everyone's like, they
Yeah.
think I'm this certain being. I actually would rather thrive in the uncertainty than the certainty because in the uncertainty is the mystery, the impossibility, the probable, all of the potential that exists. When you have certainty and you think whether it be
Mm-hmm.
a spiritual idea or a dogma, you limit the potential of what you can experience if you're open. So I always say to people, don't be certain about anything. Question everything,
Yeah.
right? I always say, do not trust an unexamined thought, emotion, experience. If you haven't examined it and you don't have some kind of insight into what you're experiencing, you haven't done some kind of self investigation, you don't trust anything blindly. But you would do the same thing here with a company, with an individual, with an investment. You would never treat the spiritual world with the lack of discipline that you treat the way you treat the relative world, right? Like
Yeah.
you way more people are way more disciplined in their investments than they are engaging in the subtle realms,
Well,
and you
yeah.
shouldn't be,
Yeah.
in my
I
So
opinion.
agree. I
I have
agree.
I have to share I have to share something with you, and it's kind of a crazy little story, but I've mentioned to you guys before about Holy Hill. It's a
Mm-hmm.
basilica on top of the hill, all that kind of stuff. Well,
Right.
recently I've been going there quite a bit, and I've had couple of a couple of encounters. But the most interesting one, the last time I was there, this is so surprising. I always go up to the church and then I sit there for a while and then I go into the chapel and sit there for a while and I feel the energy in there and that's really healing for me. But this last time I got into the elevator and I sensed some beings getting on with me. And they appeared to be more alien, like three or four of them. Their clothing was sort of a grayish, dull kind of white, off-white kind of thing, with bell sort of sleeves. And the three of them got on the elevator with me, and they were sort of talking about what they were doing. And I was just so surprised because it's in my interpretation, in my experience, going to Catholic school and being, Catholic for all these years. The last thing I ever anticipated was aliens getting on an elevator with at Holy Hill of all places. It was like, what is this? Do you mean there's aliens here too? Oh my God, this is weird.
Hmm.
How much of that is just certain beings attracted to a high vibrational energy?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a dogmatic representation of it being Christian, but like some of the most powerful basilicas and churches that have been crafted and built in certain areas. The reason they were built in certain areas is the high vibrational energy. Like, remember, I live in Sedona, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
the high vibrational area of certain areas and certain geographical areas creates that kind of attraction to all different kinds of beings. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, like there's a church here called the Church of the Holy Cross in Sedona. It's a very powerful vortex. The story is very interesting because the woman who originally wanted to create the church had this vision and stepped on the property and was on this area and was we have to she wanted to build a church. She could feel the energy and it's very sacred to the natives, that particular area too. So they built this church using the red rock from the area, and it's a wild vortex, this particular church, but it's Christian. So it's Christian because that's the church that was created there, but that's not the energy. The energy doesn't have a religion, and the
Yeah.
energy doesn't have a
Mm.
flavor. So who's to say what beings will be attracted to what area based on the vibrational experience of that particular area? So that could be negative, that could be positive, that could be contractive, that could be expansive, that could be Christian related deities, or that could be just beings that are connected to that vibration. So it's not surprising to me that we would see in high vibrational vortexes all different kinds of beings from all different
I
realms,
agree.
right?
I agree.
Which is
And really,
just
by definition, isn't God the Father an ET?
Yeah.
brilliant.
Well, there you go.
Well,
I
I mean,
just,
just, the description of God the Father,
he's a leader.
he's an ET.
Human
He's
beings
up there
project
somewhere.
a lot of things on what they view the other world to look like.
Uh-huh, exactly.
We live, listen, the one thing that is common to all humans is our profound obsession and love of story and narrative.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
story and narrative is archetypal based on energy relationships that we have based on our conditioning,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's cool that you were open enough to be in a high vibrational area of Holy Hill and allow
Yeah.
yourself to be like non-judgmental enough to be open enough to see whatever beings were coming through and experiencing that particular energy, whether that and they don't necessarily have to be related to the religion that
Yeah.
we've imposed on that
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
They were they were very highly intelligent. I don't believe that they really knew
Maybe,
that I was there at all. It wasn't
yeah,
anything, oh, I'm moving over here kind of thing on the elevator. They just got on, they were talking as if they were going to some sort of business meeting type of thing.
maybe
I
they
don't know
were
where they were.
tourists visiting. This is
Maybe.
what I'm saying. We don't know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as many stories as we can craft individually as
Hmm.
humans will be what happens, what is the potential of what can happen in a very mutable spiritual reality that's not, which is more subtle than the physical realm.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's everything you could possibly imagine. And like you said, whenever you think you've got it figured out, you get thrown something that shows you that you don't know. The more you think you know, the less you realize that less you actually know. And why
Right.
would you want to know anyways, by the way?
Right.
Wouldn't you
Right.
rather wouldn't you rather dwell in the great mystery and allow the potential and the magic of that mysterious relationship with consciousness to reveal itself in all these unique ways instead of deciding this is how it is? I mean,
Yeah, that's
dogma
true.
creates a lot of problems in our relative world,
Yeah.
right? Think about all the wars that have been created by people's belief systems and dogma around certain identification to my God is better than your God,
Hmm.
Right.
or at least that's the excuse that they give for wars. There might be
Right.
other excuses, but it's often prompted by righteous religious fervor, right?
Or
So I don't
natural
know,
resources.
or
Yeah.
naturally, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but the story is often like, oh, we're
The
on
story
some
is not, yeah.
ideological like quest. Like
Yeah.
what do you think the Crusades were not loving? The
Oh, God,
Crusades
no.
from no, they were bloody and
Yeah.
they're oppressive, and it was the oppression of Christianity throughout pagan Europe,
Hmm.
right? I mean, if you really look at the stories of what the Crusades was about. So again, dogma creates a lot of problems. So I say approach consciousness with an open, receptive field, understanding what you experience is more so based on your way and need to have what kind of interface you need with the subtle realities versus some set of rules of the way it's supposed to be. This nobody Everyone wants rules. They want to, well, tell me the steps, tell me the rules, tell me what I should do. And I said I would just approach with caution. And then there's tools to approach with caution as you become more sophisticated in how you're dealing with those subtle rules.
Mm-hmm.
The rules and the systems and the processes I have now of those kind of conversations and engagements are very different than they were 20 years ago in my lack of my innocence, naivety, and lack of experience.
Right. Bobby, I just wanted to say, with your experience with those beings in the elevator, I'm really impressed that you didn't try to name them. You didn't
Ah,
try to call them angels. You didn't try to call them Pleiadians or Arcturians or whatever, just that they were higher beings or higher vibrational beings. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's awesome because so many times, like Marcus was just saying, we try to label things.
Hmm.
We
yeah, and
try
that's to
to,
feel safe and comfortable. That's all
yeah,
that is.
yeah, that's all that
That's
is.
true. From
Yeah.
my education in the Catholic religion and going to church every day and whatnot, all those traditional things, they didn't appear as what I would call a saint. I don't know what they were. They didn't look like a regular people. They didn't have hair. I can just tell you what they were wearing, and they just didn't. I just sensed that they were very intelligent. That's all I know. I didn't try to
Great.
talk to them. I was just sensing what they were next to me in the elevator having a conversation. I don't know about what. I was just so tickled the fact that I noticed that there was something
That's
different
awesome.
that was
You
with
felt
me.
it.
And
You were open.
Yeah.
You were tuned in enough to be open to the subtler realms that was going on around you. And this is happening everywhere, all the time. There's no Some places have a draw, just like some places in the physical realm have a draw for certain people to come, like tourist areas,
mm-hmm,
right? But I mean, there is an entire world, a subtle world happening around us all the time in
All
every
the time.
moment. And I mean, for me, I didn't find it to be a exciting experience to be able to view that world at a young age because it's very confusing,
I'm
right?
sure.
It's very
Yeah.
confusing. Like the last thing you want to be able to do is have more information coming in that nobody else is experiencing or very few people are experiencing. You
Hmm.
feel crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel like you're seeing things, and then you're like, am I really seeing it? And then when we talk about seeing, we have to make that identification. When you're talking about seeing, you're not talking about physically seeing, right?
Right.
You're talking about seeing through the
In
third
your
eye.
mind's eye.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that
Mm-hmm.
the mind's eye, when that third eye is open to the subtle realms, when you have that opening and you can start to view and experience the subtle realms, again, it's going to be viewed through your conditioning, the filter of your conditioning.
Right.
That's why it's the receptive,
Yeah.
being open and receptive and not judging, not trying to figure it out, not trying to catalog it, not trying to make it something to make you comfortable is the best approach because you're just being available and responsive to what's happening around you and responding accordingly. As opposed to this is it, this is my process, this is what I have to do when I meet this kind of being, I have to do this and this and this and this and this. I don't, to me, that's again, we're bridging into that dogmatic certainty about the way to approach things.
Yeah, there's too many parameters on that. And there's
There's way
so
Hmm.
too
many
many.
possibilities of it not showing up the way that you think it should, that
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
not going to get the results that you should have or want
Hmm.
unless you let it go and just let it show up for you.
Well, you
Um,
said something powerful. You said, I trust, you were talking about how you felt around them.
Right.
And that's a key piece because it's not about what you think or what you want it to be. You have to tune into because it's a vibrational experience, right? And in
Hmm.
yeah.
your emotional experience, how you feel is a vibrational direct experience. So you tuned in, you felt this direct experience of something expansive, and then you were like, yeah, I don't have anything else to do here. Like I'm cool with this. Right.
Hmm.
So if you tune into what you said, I felt, I saw, I experienced, and I felt it. That's a powerful way to know what you're dealing with. Because if you're dealing with something contractive or dark, it's going to feel that way.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So try you.
Right.
That's one thing I would say is trust your feeling about
Right.
what you're feeling, the subtlety of the experience of the vibrations that you're connecting to. Again, people try to like they go into their head
Yeah.
if they stayed in their if they stayed in their direct experiential feeling body, you would be able, because that's the world you're dealing with in the subtle reality.
Hmm.
It's you can create whatever you think it is, but what you feel has a lot of power in the subtle realms. So tuning in through that, if it feels off, it probably is. And then you want to trust what you feel, your intuitive, and then you refine that intuitive sense the more and more engagements you have, right?
Right.
So the the chapel, the small chapel that apparently it's the temple of the Holy Mary. And
This is at
right
Holy
outside,
Hill, right?
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
there's a small shrine of Mary there. And so in the back of the, or in the front of the church, it's a big round circle, and there's the way that it's built is like it looks like rays coming off of it.
Hmm.
So I was able to tune into a spot on that area that I could feel a vibration that was very nurturing, very, it just felt really good. So as I was sitting there one of the times, I noticed that perhaps for whatever reason, I said to myself, is that the only thing that's there? What if you could tune into these other places? Maybe it's just a vibrational change. Maybe if you identify with these different areas on the circle, that something else would show up. And sure enough, as I tuned in, something else came about, a different type of energy that I felt. I didn't get all the way around the circle, but again, that was right before the time before that I saw that I sensed the aliens type of thing on the elevator. So one of the times also that in my shamanic training, the practitioner training up in Green Bay, we were working outside and I was doing we were doing a soul retrieval, and I was doing a breathing exercise, and all of a sudden, and I could see the sun as I had my eyes closed. I saw the bright light, and all of a sudden, it rose from the middle of my head, and it came all the way out and all the way above my head, and it was shaped like a diamond with those rays around it. And the first thing that came to my head was Holy Hill, all of that vibrational stuff. So
Hmm.
I'm not, the way that it felt to me was I think I have such an association with Holy Hill that that's where the vibration for me is coming from. That's what I'm feeling about that whole experience up there. And it keeps me going back. And outside of the fact that I keep going back, I feel different after I leave there. I feel happier. I feel more healed, more grounded. And so there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on there. But I was so surprised at this alien thing. And I just thought, wow, so there's something else here other than just you're in this one container of being Catholic. There's more there than that whole branch.
Yeah, and that's because you're open. Somebody else who would come may not experience any of that because they're not open to experience that because of their belief
Hmm.
systems, their dogma. Only Catholic and Christian oriented iconography will demonstrate itself in that particular area for people
Nope.
who believe that, but that's not
Yeah,
true.
right.
I don't even lean towards Christian, and I love Holy Hill. The peace there is amazing. And I
Yeah,
was actually just looking on my phone to look up to see if it was built on ley lines, but I didn't, a quick search did not give me that information. So,
right.
but
No.
I've heard that before though.
I'm
I've heard
sure it
that it was
is.
built on ley lines. Yeah.
Hmm.
See,
And
again, there's
yeah,
again, the place in Sedona, the Church of the Holy Cross. Is it built on a Catholic location? No,
no,
it's built on a high vibrational location,
location.
and the story is Catholic. So
Yeah.
when you go there, you will experience, if you're open and you're approaching it from an open, receptive space, you can experience whatever vibrational reality is connecting to that space,
Yeah.
right? So that doesn't, so I think again it says more about you that you're not so dogmatic that you would have to view a iconography that's associated to the human story of that vibrational area, right?
Right.
Yeah, that experience alone will make me want to go back more to see what else I can discover.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Because if that's there, what else is there? What am I not
right.
seeing? What have I not
Well,
touched on?
well, I'll say this, like, I
Yeah.
mean, in the beginning, when I started opening up to this when I was younger, it was fascinating to me. And I was super excited to go meet all the different beings and experience all these different things. And I was poking my finger around, trying, like, because I was curious. I don't have that kind of curiosity anymore, to be honest with you. I'm not curious about where I go. I'm just open and receptive to what I feel. I'm not looking for anything. And that's
Hmm.
like someone says, well, why aren't you? And I'm like, well, when I walk through a forest, I'm not poking all the animals. So
Hmm.
I don't walk, I don't go looking for engagements in subtle realms because I'm going to get them, and then I'm going to have to address them. I would rather be less engaged with it's not that I don't see it and experience it, but I'm not poking my finger into something because then I'm going to create a kind of engagement, and what kind of engagement am I going to create? So I say to you, be curious, be open, but only ask for things that you actually need.
My inner child is just having so much fun with this conversation because you're talking about walking through the forest and don't poke all the animals. Yeah, don't poke the bear.
Don't poke
Well,
the
Do
bear.
not poke the
right.
bear.
I'm
Listen,
not that curious. Let me
well,
just say this.
and
I'm
I will
really
tell,
not that curious.
but I'll tell you that's why the discernment of when these particular faculties awaken in people, there's not a lot of people who have discernment about it, and they're poking around, and
Mm.
that they get engagements with certain things, and that engagement is going to be based on whatever unconscious stuff they have going on. Whatever, and there's like because there's stuff in our fields that are not necessarily expansive, so we could create relationships with different things, and people have no discernment about how they engage with that stuff. And then they create relationships and contracts with all these different beings that are not necessarily healthy for you
And they don't
because
even know they're
not,
doing it. That's
they
the
don't even know
point.
they're different.
They don't know that they're creating
I know,
contracts. And
I
that is
know.
so important to make a
But
point
that's no
of
different than the
because,
physical realm.
yeah.
Think of all the bad relationships and that. And so someone says to me, well, how do I train myself to be in the subtler realms? I'm like, well, the same skills of discernment, discipline, connection, consciousness, awareness that you'd have connecting with other human beings is the same kind of skills that you use in those more nuanced worlds. And
Mhm.
again, most people aren't that mature in this world. So how do you think they're going to be that mature in the other worlds? Right.
Yeah.
So
Sloppy into thinking, as you said.
yeah, and this is why
Yeah.
so much of unfortunately, so much of the process I've been working with people on for many, many years has been helping people understand your conditioning, know where you're
Yeah.
coming from, get what makes you tick, because that is going to influence the way you view everything. Like the level of maturity you have as a being applies to every world you engage in. And so if you're immature in this world, you're going to be immature in the relative in the subtle realms. Most people. Very few people are mature here and then immature in those realms, or immature here and then mature in those realms. That's the filter from which we engage. So I really fully believe the more mature an individual is, the more sophisticated and nuanced and connected they can be when they're connecting to those subtle realms.
And a lot
So a
of
lot
that
of
comes
people,
with experience too. I want to
it
toss that
does,
in there.
I know you're right. And the
A lot
fact
of
that we've
that
been
comes
doing
with
this for 30
experience.
years creates a different kind
Hmm.
of experience. And so many things I've learned not to do happen from me poking around doing shit I never should have been doing in the first place in those worlds.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Same story here. Yeah.
That's why you hear this cautiousness.
Yes.
Why I'm talking with cautiousness and
Yeah.
I'm trying to get people to be disciplined, because I mean, when this opened up for me, remember young, 10, 11 years old, I created relationships and engagements with different things innocently and naively, and then had to unravel a lot of stuff that wasn't necessary for me to experience, or maybe it was for me to learn. But did I really need to have that many experiences? And that most of that was immaturity in the spiritual realm, which is why a mentor and training is so powerful for people, right?
Can I
Two
just
of
say
the
too? I'm
Go
sorry. I
ahead,
know
go
I
ahead,
keep
go ahead, go ahead.
interrupting
No,
you.
no,
I
no, go. No, it's good, it's
apologize.
good. No,
Um,
please.
what I wanted to say was just because you were 11 or 12 years old in this realm doesn't mean that you were
True.
recognized as a child in another realm.
That's true too.
So
That's
there's the difference too, because your spirit have after many
doesn't have
lifetimes
time.
was not 10 or 11 years old.
No.
So that's another thing to throw in there too. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know I keep
No,
doing
no,
that, but
it's a good point. It's a good
yeah.
point. But again, both of us have lived this for most of our
Hmm.
life. So we're coming from a place of being far more cautious and discerning and
Yeah.
disciplined. And people are mostly sloppy. They learn a new skill and they're poking around curious, which is not a bad thing, but curiosity without discernment is not healthy.
Hmm.
in any circumstance,
Right.
Right. Regardless. Yeah.
regardless of what world you're in, right? And so here's the other thing. I will say this about all the different realms. There are rules in every realm, right? They have a set of protocol that you follow. So
Mhm.
you would never go into a Christian temple and preach Buddhism, right? You would never go into certain areas. You wouldn't go into a Republican gathering and preach a Democrat philosophy, right? So there's layers of respect about the rules and the accepted decorum of any experience you have. The same applies in the spirit realm. There's a decorum in different realities, and so my first thing is always determine what the rules are. I mean, and I'm very cautious, and I'm not mucking about. And again, this is why I'm like, why I don't want to go poking around because it doesn't necessarily. And again, when you after the novelty wears off of like being able to experience different realms and see subtleties, then you start to become more and more mature around the way your
Hmm.
relationship to. But in the beginning, it's phenomena. It's exciting. It's oh my God. It's not bad because you have to have experiences if you're going to learn how to negotiate those worlds. And what is the shamanic training that you're going through? Helping you learn a mature relationship with some tools and some operating protocol in those worlds.
Hmm.
A good training will teach you that.
Right.
Hmm.
But again, I wouldn't say that there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I know I don't sound very I
I
don't sound
agree
very
with you, though. There are so many people out there like, oh, well, this came to me and I'm just going to go out there and teach it. But there's no follow-up. There's no mentoring afterwards. There's no, if you're going to find a teacher that's engaged.
yeah, or and is doing those kind of things that you want to be doing, or the skills that you want to learn, and usually attracted to teachers based on what you're working through, and that teacher has those skills available to them, and then you're like, help me understand how to navigate those.
Right.
You've heard me talk, Bobby, about how the new age world is so incredibly um, immature,
Flippant. Yes.
Yeah.
a
Very
bit
flippant.
immature, lack
Yep.
of and that people treat their spiritual experience with far less discipline and devotion and respect than they treat their physical human experience.
The
And
novelty is the word that
it
pops
just
in.
becomes
Yeah.
novelty and entertainment,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. There's a lot of ego out there too.
Hmm.
Well, here's the other thing. Everyone thinks that the spiritual world has no ego. Everything in the spiritual world is filtered through your ego. The way you view your ego, the relationship you have with your own ego structure determines how you engage with the subtle realms. I think it's
Yeah.
part. I think everybody who's in the spiritual world needs to do training so they understand their conditioning because you will face it. Now,
Hmm.
let's just assume you don't do any of that work and you go into the world and you start playing around. You
Yeah.
will learn how to deal with your ego structure by playing in these different realms the same way. You're going to get learning and opportunity and spiritual lessons that now, instead of getting them in the physical world with human beings, you're getting the same lessons around your ego, but in the spiritual world. It's still part of the journey.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
so funny to me that people bypass their conditioning process. You're going to face that. You face it in
Yeah.
meditation, right? You're going to face if you meditate for long periods of time, like when we meditate, when I'm wife and I meditate for 6 or 8 hours straight, you're going to face aspects of your ego when you do that. Any spiritual process that is very potent will have you face your ego. So you're going to face your ego in the spiritual world. You're going to face your ego in your meditation process. You're going to face your ego in the relative world. You can't escape it.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
So I just
Yeah.
deal with it. You might as well just deal with it. Deal with it. Become as refined and as knowledgeable and as conscious of your own relationship with self as possible. That's only going to provide better tools, especially when you're engaging in the nuanced realities.
Right. Exactly. We have about 1 minute left, guys. What is the most important thing that anybody wants to say at this point?
Go ahead, Marcus.
I heard crickets. I heard crickets. Just
I was
saying.
waiting to see if someone. I would say this to you. I would say approach things with a level of caution. Don't live in certainty of anything. Be open and receptive. Trust how you feel. And develop your relationship with your own conditioning, that's the filter from which any spiritual experience is going to happen. If you
Right.
have those things going on, and that's all kind of treating the whole process with a kind of sacredness and a profound respect that it's not often given, and it should be.
Mhm.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
don't poke the bear. Don't
Don't
poke the
poke
bear.
the
Don't poke the bear.
bear.
You will regret that. And
Well,
don't
I
think you
mean,
know
it'll
everything.
it'll be it'll
Yeah.
be an opportunity and an invitation to learn something about your own ego structure through the spiritual experience. You know how many people may not have stuff going on, drama in their relative world, but then they transfer that drama completely into the spiritual world and
Mm.
all the spiritual warfare. They're still learning about their ego process in that too.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It doesn't matter where you go, you're given a reflection and an opportunity to know self. The spiritual
Right.
world is no different.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I mean, you keep calling it the subtle realms, but it's actually more intense when you get lessons from there. It's
Yeah, I would agree.
it is more intense. Yeah.
And
And yeah, go ahead, Bobby.
sometimes you need other people, like Marcus, to help you clear out all of those things that you thought you knew how to do,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I
didn't
mean,
because you were poking the bear.
and that's part of, but I mean, that's how I learned. I wouldn't say
Hmm.
it was the wisest way to learn, and that's why I don't advise people to learn that way. But we're gonna put our hand in the blender as many times until we decide we don't need to do that anymore,
Yep.
right? Till
That
it
is
hurts.
exactly true. That is
Right.
exactly true.
I know.
Yeah.
Be discerning with yourself. Right.
Yep.
Don't poke the
But how
bear.
Exactly.
many times do we stay in relationships that aren't healthy for us, or we stay in engagements and enter until we learn the lessons from that circumstance? No different in the spiritual world. You'll stay in engagements with specific kinds of beings and masters and training. There's training too that happens there. You'll be with certain elevated beings as part of the process till you don't need that experience with that being anymore, or you've passed the course material that's required with that particular experience, right?
Yep.
That ascended master, that guide, they've taught you everything you need to know, and then you move on to the next learning. No different than in the physical reality.
A great place to end. I also wanted to say, subscribe, ring the notification bell, share, follow us. Because every time we have Marcus on, this whole new wealth of information that comes up. And if you find it helpful, share it with your friends.
Pass it on. Pay it
Pass it
forward.
on. Pay it forward. Exactly.
Thanks for
Exactly.
listening today, everybody. Thank you, Marcus, for
Yeah.
being our wonderful
Yeah.
guest again and
Thank
again
you.
and again. And
Always a pleasure
Christina,
to be
good
here.
luck to you in all of your travels and be safe. Be safe,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take care.
Always. All right. Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye bye.